God is with Joseph, indeed, but as with any good narrative, we must know that when things start out so well, something bad is about to happen. Well, Potiphar's wife becomes infatuated with Joseph. So here we have it. In Genesis 39, we see that after being sold into slavery by his brothers, Joseph is taken down to Egypt, where he is purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of the Pharaoh and captain of the guard. We are informed that, though enslaved, the Lord is with Joseph, at least for a period, blessing all that he does. Potiphar notices Joseph's capabilities and ends up entrusting him with complete authority over his household and possessions. And Joseph found grace in his, Potiphar's, sight. And he, Joseph, served him. And he, Potiphar, made him overseer of his house. And all that he, Potiphar, had, he put into his, Joseph's, hands. The King James Version sometimes doesn't make it clear which pronoun belongs to whom. Given what might happen when a person is sold into slavery, this is a good outcome for Joseph. He is lucky to have been purchased by a higher ranking officer who, we can assume, is able to see Joseph's talents, which we'll find out are extraordinary. God is with Joseph, indeed, but as with any good narrative, we must know that when things start out so well, something bad is about to happen. Well, Potiphar's wife becomes infatuated with Joseph. So here we have it. As we might expect, our new hero is appealing, and unfortunately, appealing to this woman in particular. This cannot come to good. She tries to seduce Joseph and is very direct about the matter. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." The emphasis in bold is mine. Joseph resists her advances, insisting that to yield would be both a betrayal of his master's trust and a sin against God. One day, when the house is empty, she grabs Joseph's garment, demanding he lie with her. He flees, leaving his cloak in her hand. But Potiphar's wife, she's never named, is determined, and as you may remember from his colorful coat, Joseph has a bad history with overwear. Potiphar's wife was humiliated. She falsely accuses Joseph of attempting to assault her, showing the cloak as evidence. Potiphar believes her, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. For more videos on Genesis, please subscribe to this channel. And if you'd like the complete course, the Udemy link is in the description below. But God is with Joseph, except in the matter of the spurned wife. It turns out that prison is not so bad, so maybe this is just God's plan. Joseph gains favor with the warden. We're not told how or why, but by this time we can see that Joseph is something special. So Joseph was not bound, but in fact placed in charge of all the other prisoners. We're told that the Lord continues to guide and bless him, even in captivity. I'm thinking that he well should be blessed because he's innocent and shouldn't be in prison. But there again, we can assume that innocence has little purchase in a Bronze or Iron Age Egyptian prison. Or, well, I don't know, sometimes in a modern day prison. In Genesis 40, Joseph is still in prison. Two of Pharaoh's officials are also put in prison and placed under Joseph's care. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. So we're back to sketch comedy with these lines. A butler and a baker are thrown into prison under Joseph's care. But because of what? We don't know, but we can speculate. Maybe Pharaoh was having a bad day. His butler tripped and fell, while the baker's bread was too hard or too soft. Kidding aside, we learn later that these two were higher up the ladder than they are first presented, and this misleading first impression may be a fault, really, of the King James Version, the translation there. The butler, it is made clear later, is Pharaoh's cupbearer, an esteemed position. The cupbearer is the man who makes sure that the wine is good for His Highness, and very importantly, that is not poisoned. One thing certain about being Pharaoh or king is that there is always someone else who wants your job, and often they'll stop at nothing to get it. We also discovered that the baker was in actuality the chief chef, right? So he's not just a baker, he's the chief chef. Again, this is an important position. He's in charge of Pharaoh's food. And this is a tall order because the food has to be tasty, of course, and not poisoned. The narrative works better if we assume that something went wrong with the meal and Pharaoh knows that it was the fault of one of these two men. So he throws both of them in jail, but exactly what they're charged with is not explained. One night, both of these men have troubling dreams. Now, they are in prison, so you think that troubling dreams are part of life. But these dreams are special in both a good and a bad way. The next morning, Joseph notices their distress. Remember that Joseph is close to God, and he is a dreamer and knows the dream world. And now we're about to find out how much. Joseph tells the two men that interpretations belong to God and invites them to share their dreams. The chief cupbearer goes first. In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cups was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup unto Pharaoh's hand. Joseph interprets this to mean that within 3 days, 3 branches, meaning 3 days, the Pharaoh will restore him to his position as cupbearer. Joseph asks the cupbearer to remember him and speak to Pharaoh on his behalf when that happens. Let's not forget that Joseph was thrown into a pit just out of spite and also wrongfully imprisoned. Joseph has our sympathy by now. The chief baker is apparently encouraged by the good news. He then tells his dream. And I had 3 white baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats or baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Now, to us, this doesn't sound so good, and Joseph tells it like it is. Within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and thou shall hang thee on a tree. And the bird shall eat thy flesh from off thee. And just when we were about to be happy for the wine guy, we have the image of a hanging with the corpse being eaten by birds. Welcome again to the Bible. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, the dreams come true exactly as Joseph says. The cupbearer is restored to his position, and the baker is executed. So sad. Also sad is the fact that the chief butler, let's read this quotation, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph. Sometimes his syntax in the King James Version is difficult. But forgot him. It seems here that the chief butler or cupbearer, whatever his title, is ungrateful, and that Joseph will miss his shot at getting a mention to the Pharaoh. In Genesis 41, we find out that 2 full years after the ungrateful cupbearer gets his old job back, Pharaoh has two troubling dreams. This passage is a bit long and a little bit difficult, but let's slow it up a little bit and define some of the words that are used here by the KJV. It's important to the story. Okay, Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine. Now, kine is an old plural for cow. So, kine are cows. And fat-fleshed. Now, this means a well-fed or plump cow. And they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored, weak, and lean-fleshed, skinny, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. Now, so 7 healthy, fat cows come up from the Nile, followed by 7 thin, sickly cows. The weak cows devour the fat ones. What does this mean? In the second dream, we're told that Pharaoh dreamed that 7 ears of corn, now this is not corn in our sense of the word, but wheat or barley or other grains, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank, abundant, rank means abundant here, and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank, abundant, and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Pharaoh awakens, disturbed, and he calls Egypt's magicians, presumably people who can interpret dreams. Apparently, this was a profession. But if they are professionals, they need their pay docked, because none of them could interpret Pharaoh's dream. At this moment, the chief cupbearer remembers being Joseph. One wonders at this point if he shouldn't have been hanged instead of the baker. But he admits to the fault of his forgetfulness. So let's give him a break. He tells Pharaoh that of the Hebrew prisoner who correctly interpreted the baker's dreams. His and the baker's dreams. Pharaoh sends for Joseph, who hastily shaves and dresses up a bit before being brought from the dungeon to stand before the great Egyptian monarch. Pharaoh recounts his dreams to Joseph, and Joseph explains that both dreams have the same meaning and form one message. God is revealing what he is about to do. There will be 7 years of, as the KJV says, great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. Joseph emphasizes that since the dream was essentially repeated, the 14-year future of Egypt has been firmly decided by God. This cycle of abundance, followed by famine, will soon take place. Joseph then says to Pharaoh to appoint a man discreet or discerning and wise to oversee the land of Egypt, storing up grain during the years of plenty to prepare for the famine. Joseph just put himself forward as the guy to do this, if you haven't noticed. It doesn't hurt that he can see into the future. He also has a management structure in mind that he proposes to Pharaoh. Appoint officers over the land and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. So save 20% of the abundance for the future famine. Joseph has a business plan already in mind. Hire him, I say. The officials present agree. They recognize Joseph's divine insight, declaring, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh then appoints Joseph as second in command over all Egypt, just like that. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Pharaoh places his signet ring on Joseph's hand, dressing him in fine linen, and giving him a new Egyptian name, along with a wife, who is the daughter of a priest. Well done, Joseph. All this on the basis of one job interview done on work release from prison. Genesis tells us that Joseph was 30 years old when he stood in front of Pharaoh for this grand promotion. He was 17 years old when sold into slavery. After 13 years, it is certain that God is now clearly with Joseph. Now time moves quickly. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph travels throughout Egypt, organizing the collection of surplus grain and storing it in cities. 2 sons are born to him before the famine, Manasseh and Ephraim. So Joseph's line will continue. When the 7 years of famine begin, it strikes not only Egypt, but all surrounding lands. Because of Joseph's preparations, Egypt has food, and people from all countries come to Joseph to buy grain. So this story is a fairy tale of sorts, given that it would be unlikely that Pharaoh or a king would promote someone to such high standing without seeing proof of the prophecy first, proof of concept. But as the story goes, Joseph saves the Egyptians and makes their country the last resort marketplace for grain purchases for the surrounding world. You might speculate that the price of grain went sky high, and the news of plentiful grain in Egypt will reach Joseph's father, Jacob, who, along with everyone else, needs grain to stay alive. This is the subject of our next lecture. For more videos on Genesis, please subscribe to this channel. And if you'd like the complete course, the Udemy link is in the description below.